What if I told you that Diontae Johnson has a chance to suit up on Christmas afternoon? Not for the Ravens, potentially for the Houston Texans. It would be an under 48-hour turnaround and perhaps is unlikely, but he has been claimed on waivers by the Houston Texans. And as Adam Schefter first tweeted out, this kind of makes too much sense for Houston given Tank Dell's news and the very, very serious knee injury that he sustained over the weekend. But Diontae Johnson, man, this dude's been a hot potato. In the last calendar year, he's been now with 4 different organizations across the NFL. And this is his 3rd this season alone. He began, of course, in Carolina. The Ravens traded for him prior to the deadline last month, waived him last week, and now the Houston Texans, who are very needy at wide receiver, are taking a chance. And again, they kind of were put in a situation where they had to take a chance because of how desperate they are right now for wide receivers ahead of the postseason. The only issue, you're getting a dude who isn't exactly stable. We all remember December 1st, just over 3 weeks ago, in a pivotal game against the Philadelphia Eagles, when his number was called by the Ravens, he declined the opportunity to play. The ultimate sign of selfishness, a level of entitlement, and ultimately not exactly a team guy kind of action. Dan Orlovsky commented on this news a short while ago on NFL Live.
They've been decimated, to Shefty's point, by the injuries. They need someone relatively reliable opposite Nico Collins, and that was going to be that Tank Dell type of player. And obviously the horrific injury, thoughts and prayers, hopefully he's going to heal up. So it was needed. It's also like maybe a last opportunity for Diontae Johnson. This is a super talented guy that's on his 3rd team this season. It didn't work out in Carolina. He gets traded to Baltimore, a great opportunity for him there, and it doesn't work out there. Now he goes to another playoff football team with an elite quarterback. He's got to take advantage of this. So for him, show up and prove that you are that talented player that also produces. And for Houston, you need it to work out, because for you to have any chance in the playoffs, you're going to have somebody outside of Nico Collins to try and impact and hold the defense.
Ooh, a lot riding on this for the Houston Texans. I mentioned the roster shuffling that's taken place. And again, I just want to reiterate, while there's a chance that Diontae could suit up, you'd have to think that's unlikely, being that he's probably on his way to Houston now. Well, it's the 23rd. We're already, again, under 48 hours to go to kickoff. So unless this is just some insane turnaround and they so desperately need him, maybe, just maybe, you'll see him where apparently he loves being, on the sidelines. We'll see. The other move, Aaron Wilson, NFL reporter, tweeting out a short while ago that Steven Sims Jr., a former undrafted rookie who first signed with the Washington Commanders a few years back, was claimed by the Ravens after being waived by Houston. So some shuffling going on. Diontae Johnson, for obvious reasons, waived by the Ravens. Steven Sims Jr., a punt return specialist and wide receiver, waived by Houston. And then they just traded places. And that's where things stand right now. Cordell Woodland, my guy from 105.7 The Fan here locally in town, is like, hey, he has a special teams background, so he could be brought in to compete as a returner. It was a rough day for Desmond King on Saturday. And of course, Tylan Wallace had struggled prior to Desmond getting the opportunity. Now, I tweeted out over the weekend that the Ravens got to feel pretty unsettled. If there's an area that they probably feel unsettled in, it's at punt returner. Desmond King has shown juice and pop, but he's had a hard time fielding the football. And that's obviously not an area that the Ravens can afford to experiment in as they get ready for a postseason run. Now, does anybody remember what's notable about this edition? You got to go back to the divisional round last year when the Houston Texans and the Ravens matched up in Baltimore. Steven Sims took a punt return to the house. You guys remember that? He took a punt return to the house against the Ravens in the postseason a year ago. So he's got a little bit of juice to him. Maybe, just maybe, the 27-year-old's going to get a shot to compete. He spent 2019 and 20 in Washington, 21 in Buffalo, 21 and 22 in Pittsburgh, and the last couple of years in Houston. 78 career receptions for over 700 receiving yards. He's got over 1,700 return yards and 7 total touchdowns. Steven Sims Jr., perhaps an option for the Ravens as they try to tinker a little bit with where things currently stand. That is the latest. Diontae Johnson's going to Houston. Maybe, just maybe, as Orlovsky alluded to, this is his final shot in the NFL. 4 teams in a calendar year, not exactly the best resume. They say in the professional world outside of sports, if you just hop from job to job and then put that on your LinkedIn and you got a different one every single year, probably not exactly an attractive trait from a resume standpoint. But talk about a flurry of moves just within the last couple hours or so. On top of that, Ravens West got deeper. Just when you think it couldn't get any more deep. That roster continues to add former Ravens. Look who is on the move to join the Los Angeles Chargers. The polarizing Eddie Jackson, a safety who was brought in the latter half of free agency by Baltimore earlier this past offseason. Of course, he was benched. There was clearly something internal that took place between he and the team. They kept it very much under wraps. He clearly was not a good fit in Baltimore. He clearly was not pleased whatsoever with his role. And as a result, the Ravens cut him just a few weeks ago, on top of benching Marcus Williams, who probably will be cut this offseason and will be a big, big cap hit. I should say dead cap money. So Eddie Jackson joining the Chargers practice squad. Jim Harbaugh says, why not? And of course, John Kelly, who spent some time in Baltimore. He was released from the practice squad. Let me tell you, I don't know why they'll take a chance. Maybe this is more so about having practice squad depth. But I find it pretty hilarious that anything that maybe can't get done in Baltimore, you wonder if this is more like a competitive thing between brothers out of spite, right? Like competitive brotherly spite. Don't you think? Like, oh, you weren't able to make it work for him with your squad? Oh, it wasn't a good fit. He didn't like it there. Oh, I'm going to show you he's going to like life out west in LA. He's going to have a role for us. Couldn't you see that being a classic, like, brotherly type of dynamic between Jim and John? Have an incredible amount of love and admiration for one another, but just an absurd level of competition that's just inhumane and an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. Blah, 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 blah. I could totally see that. It's such a classic brotherly Harbaugh dynamic that we've grown accustomed to learning more and more about within that family. Just a ridiculous. Oh, those guys, man. Never cease to amaze. Field Yates just tweeting out a short while ago here as I process this for a second here. Besides the Texans, one other team attempted to claim Diontae Johnson off of waivers, and that was the Chargers. See what I mean? Literally, this tweet just came out a minute ago. Houston had priority over Los Angeles in terms of the list as 2 wide-out needy teams competing in the AFC claimed Johnson. Oh, that's funny how that came out literally as I'm talking about this theory of, like, I'm going to do it better than you did. So the Chargers were going after Diontae Johnson in this waiver wire battle. He ultimately goes to Houston, who's certainly needed every bit of Diontae's services if he's actually willing to give his services. Don't get me going again. You know where we went last time with this. Don't get me going again. Are you willing to actually give your services, Diontae? Or do you think that you're going to come in and be owed something as if you already earned something? That's the message that he sent by quitting on his teammates. His number was called, and he refused to go into the game. In a big-time opportunity, by the way, against the Philadelphia Eagles. And, of course, what happened since? Oh, just every other opportunity that he totally fumbled, given Rashad's injury, given Nelson Aguilar's concussion. I can't think of another fumble to that extent quite some time. But in the NFL, as we've seen with domestic violence in the past, as we've seen with crime and polarizing figures, the NFL is home to the second chance. And in Diontae's case, apparently it's a fourth chance. Second chance in Carolina, third chance in Baltimore, fourth chance now in Houston. Will he fumble this one? Best of luck. Best of luck. Again, no clue whether or not they're going to trot him out there and if he'll even be ready for a Christmas Day game against his former team. But Diontae Johnson looking like he's going to have an opportunity to play in the postseason for the Houston Texans. Well, let me tell you, All-Pro Marlo, I don't think there's any question. This dude is back, and he's come back with vengeance. Marlon is the number 2 coverage cornerback in the NFL through 16 weeks. He's got 6 picks, which leads all AFC players. A touchdown, which of course was his first pick 6 just this past weekend. A forced fumble. And he is a part of the number 1 defense statistically across the National Football League since week 8. Now, I don't know about Defensive Player of the Year like Jack is getting after here. I love that he's building up his guy. But I'll say this. All-Pro Marlon is absolutely aiding this team right now. Kyle Hamilton's my defensive MVP for reasons that I'll discuss in just a second. But you cannot question or overstate Marlon's value and his game-changing mentality. Sarah and I actually ran the numbers, and we had to jog our memories earlier today. He has helped seal multiple games already this year, including that first game against Cincy where he picked off Burrow. I'm pretty sure the second time against Cincy was the forced fumble on Chase Brown. Don't quote me on that. I believe that's what we summarized earlier today. And then, of course, we all remember the pick 6 from Saturday on Russell Wilson, where he effectively jumped the route and took it to the house. Kyle's my MVP, but there has been no one on this defensive team who's been more opportunistic and timely than Marlon Humphrey has. Tremendous year for number 44, and congratulations to he and his significant other on the birth of their son just this past week. What a momentous week, I'm sure, for Marlon. But for my money, the MVP is the unicorn, and that is Kyle Hamilton. The Ravens defense now is 4th best across the league since moving Kyle to deep safety. Of course, our Darius Washington's been alongside him as well. And these two have really become effective, productive, dynamic running mates. You look at the alignment prior to Kyle taking over on the back end, he was all over the field. And at times you will continue to see him all over the field. But he has settled things down on the back end. He has streamlined communication. He has gotten guys in the right place. There's just a sense of calm. And while we're talking about Kyle, you got to talk about his defensive coordinator. Because the Ravens EPA, in terms of EPA allowed per dropback ranking, weeks 1 through 9 collectively ranked 28th league-wide. Bottom corridor. Weeks 10 through 16 since, which of course came with a lot of change. Kyle and Ardarius on the back end, benching Marcus, cutting Eddie, demoting Trenton Simpson, getting Big Mike Pierce healthy up front. They have leapfrogged to first, guys, and that sample size is growing as the weeks go on. Zach Orr starting to get some national attention as well from Peter Schrager of NFL Network earlier today.
Great pride in giving out this week's Coach of the Week award to a much maligned defensive coordinator from the first half of the season, whose unit has turned it around and is now leading the way. Zach Orr, the 32-year-old defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, is the recipient of the award this week. The Ravens defense made big play after big play against the Pittsburgh Steelers offense on Saturday. In the biggest game of the season, we saw a Marlon Humphrey pick six that completely changed the tenor of this game. And also this play here, Russell Wilson running for the end zone, making a play, and then Washington jars the ball loose. Ravens recover. They get the ball. Look, Zach Orr and that defense has been picked apart by pundits the entire first half of the season. But when it's mattered most, the last few weeks, the Ravens defense has come together. Or give him credit for using Kyle Hamilton in a way that might be unorthodox and getting him to play other roles than he's traditionally done earlier in the season. Zach Orr, I take great pride in it. A 32-year-old ex-player whose career was cut short and has done it the right way and is now the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. You are the Coach of the Week.
Well, how about that? A far cry, as Peter alluded to, a far cry from just a couple months ago. I know a lot of you wanted this dude out on the streets, but maybe, just maybe, the arrival of Dean Pease, the personnel adjustments, and getting his feet from underneath him has allowed him to call the game more freely, to see things more clearly. And Zach Orr and his defense rounding into form at the proper time. All three phases right now, peaking at the correct time if you want to make a deep run. Justin Tucker seems to have emerged from the bye week with a clearer mind, hitting from 51, seeming like he's got a, morale boost in his media sessions. The defense since week 10, week 11, starting to really play sound football on all three levels. And of course, the offense, the number one ranked offense and the scariest offense in the league, continuing to click on all cylinders. There's a lot to like right now about the Baltimore Ravens. And they very much could be in a position where they control their own destiny. Should they win out and should Kansas City take care of business on Christmas Day in Pittsburgh, you're looking at an opportunity to go back-to-back years where you take the AFC North crown and you enter Wild Card Weekend as one of the hottest, most dangerous teams across the league.